Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the CineClwd Podcast. This is a little bit of a different episode. I'm up here alone and I'm sitting dead center. Normally, I'd be over here and Nick would be over here, but Nick is gone. He's left. Essentially, I'm running the show alone today. I'm kidding, obviously. This is just a special episode. We have an interview today that I've conducted with Jon Schneider, who created the Saturday Night Network, and we're going to talk about Saturday night. The interview was recorded separately. He's not coming here. I'm sitting alone. So we're going to cut to that, and then yeah, that'll be it for today. So enjoy the interview with Jon Schneider. All right. So, all right, everybody. I'm here with Jon Schneider from the Saturday Night Network. Hi, Jon. How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all right. This is actually really cool. I'm really happy that you're doing this. I'm grateful that you took time out of your day to do this.
Of course.
Because we're going to talk about Saturday night. Saturday night, for all intents and purposes, for me, has been the most fun I've had in the theater this year. And I see a shit ton of movies, like I see a lot. And,
okay.
I see like these Oscar baits, these flat out raunchy comedies. I see everything. And when I see a movie like Saturday Night, it's so different. It's so special. And part of it is due to what it's making. It's making a biopic about that first episode of Saturday Night Live. And I perhaps believe that there's no better creator on the internet to talk about that than you. Who knows about Saturday Night like you do? Who knows about Saturday Night Live like you do? So, but before we get into the movie, I wanted to quickly just ask you about like your platform, Saturday Night Network. It's a great, awesome follow on any platform. What you guys talk about over the course of the week after every Saturday night episode is awesome. But I want to know, how did it start? Like at the beginning of it, talk about it a little bit.
So,
let me know what you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I just have to sneeze. Sorry, actually, I think it went away, but it's okay.
All right, it's okay.
Keep it together. Classic recording, but anyways,
right.
okay, we're good. Yeah, no, thanks. I'm grateful to be here as well. And for me, I loved Saturday Night Live. Growing up, I especially loved it when I was in high school, and I got to hang out with my friends and watch new episodes of the show and talk about sketches and recreate sketches. So I was always into the show. And then, as my friends sort of fell off the show, I was like kind of in and out, and I really liked following it, but I felt like I lost the connection with my friends that, I feel like SNL is a great show to watch with people. You end up like enjoying and laughing and feeling like the sketches are something that's mutual when you're hanging out with people and watching the show. So for me, like, I lost that a little bit and I missed that connection. And then around 2015, so almost 10 years ago, was the 40th anniversary of Saturday Night Live. And
I remember.
Yeah, it was just like the biggest night in television, just getting all of these amazing stars from SNL past to come back to the show. So I was sitting there watching it, having a great time, not really knowing who like half the people were. And I was like, and I'm the type of person that like when I get into something, I really get into something. So I was like, okay, I need to do this properly. I love this show. I've loved this show for 10 years. I need to go back and I need to watch everything. So I went back to 1975. I watched the entire series, started taking detailed notes about stuff. I didn't know what I was going to do with them really, but I just had it. And then when I eventually caught up,
conveniently had it laying around.
Yeah, well, it was like one of those things, like I'm a big like numbers and data person. Like I love statistics and sports analytics. So I always look at SNL like a little bit like live sports, where there's really only three things that are live right now on television: sports, award shows, and Saturday Night Live. So for me, I felt like SNL in a way is its own competition show. Like all of these people are trying to make it in Hollywood, get into film and television. And this is sort of like the minor leagues of like, you go out there and we're getting to see these people before they're major stars. So there's a competitive aspect to this. So I was taking statistics about like who was doing well in certain eras and comparing and all of that. Anyways, we got to about 2020 when COVID came around, and my background is as an event MC, and I didn't have another place to sort of use my tool of like talking to people and engaging. So I thought like maybe this would be a good opportunity to start a podcast. And I had a Twitter account called SNL Stats that I had started like a couple years earlier. And I was just like tweeting out a few things. And one of the brothers of an SNL cast member, Justin Gardner, who's the brother of Heidi Gardner. Justin reached out and he was like, "Hey, I think you should maybe turn this into a podcast." So it was, yeah. So I was like, oh, okay,
that's actually very cool. That's pretty,
yeah.
that's very cool, actually.
So it like all came together in like a really weird way. And then I started it, and it was called SNL Stats.
Yeah.
And what I did is that like, I was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to really try and turn this into a thing. So I reached out to like all of the people who wrote SNL blogs and recaps for news publications. So I sent emails to all of them, and I said like, hey, I'm going to do these like weekly roundtables where we talk about Saturday Night Live and talk about maybe the analytics portion of it. Would you be interested? So I found like some super fans, I found some journalists, and I found some professional hosts, and we got together and we had a rotating panel of people come on. And I sort of like thought that it would be just like a little thing that I would do as a hobby on the side, but it ended up being it ended up growing from there to the point where I said, okay, I don't think we could just do this about the analytics of SNL. I think we should be doing like proper recaps, building out the network a little bit, and maybe I could devote more of my time to making this my job. So we ended up changing to the SNL network and now the Saturday Night Network, where we grew from there, ended up connecting with NBC and Saturday Night Live, and they loved what we were doing and promoting the show. So they, work with us now regularly to help promote their shows, and we're on their press list. They give us interviews with current cast members, former cast members. We've basically grown over the last few years to just produce video documentaries about the show, as well as all different types of content. And now we do multiple shows a week covering every episode. So that's like the short version.
Jon, it's awesome, man. It's awesome. I see you. So when I look at you guys on Facebook, what the fuck? Sorry, Instagram, YouTube, etc., I see that, and I'm like, it's truly like an inspirational story, because when you think about it, you started in 2020, COVID. That's 4 years ago. Like, compared to where you are now versus where you were then, like you said, the NBC stuff, it's interesting, and your content is so interesting. The rotating group, the roundtable, the recap. It's a lot of fun, and it helps me, who I've always liked SNL, not to the point of like your fandom for it, but I've always liked SNL. It's a show that I will watch I'll rewatch sketches, I'll go back. I fell out of it. Obviously, you go through different parts of life. You like it, you don't like it. But having a platform like yours that I can check, especially like just this past weekend, the Ariana Grande episode, I see the screen time on my phone. I'm like, who keeps track of it? And I'm like, that's awesome. It's awesome to know, because you almost feel like, the SNL team trusts this host to take more of the screen time, it's just cool to see the talent and what they are and how long they are on screen. And it's really thanks to you guys that people get to see that stuff, because no one is really, like you said, sports tracking. You could pull up any stat you want, but what about your favorite television show? It's not the same.
Right. Well, thank you. First of all, I'm very humbled. So thank you so much. You mentioned the screen time, and that's something that Mike Murray, one of my colleagues at the Saturday Night Network, he hosts our Wednesdays by the number shows, where if you're still looking for that stat show, we do that every Wednesday. But one of the things that I found, and this would be, in a way, it's sort of advice for new podcasters, which is, I never considered this like a one-man show. I never wanted this to just be about me. Like for me, it was all about community building, because there was, popular websites in the past, or, Discord servers or places where people went to gather to talk about Saturday Night Live. But I really felt like if we could create like a home that bridges the show to the fans, that would be really cool. Because like we are privileged that we get to speak to the show sometimes and ask them questions and get answers to things that fans want to know, and then we get to communicate that back down to them. So for me, the fact that we can get like rotating podcasters, so people feel like they can connect and talk about the show they want to talk about, and then also have this place where everyone can gather from all around the world. Like, you may not know anybody who likes SNL, but then you got to find this community online, you got to hang out and talk with them about it. Like, to me, that's the fun of this whole thing. So I always looked at it as like we're an SNL fan army.
It is. There's no better way to explain it than the way you just did. That's what it feels like as a viewer, as someone who would watch your videos and stuff. And I say but I mean the team, the entirety of the network. You could tell that there's this, like you said, it's that branch from the source to the fans, and you guys are like a middleman, able to pass information, able to give the audience someone to relate to. So that if I'm home alone watching SNL, I can then put on you guys and see, okay, this is what we're talking about. I'm not the only person tonight who watched SNL, even though I might have been in my household, I'm not the only one, That's kind of the same goal we have in mind when we try to talk about movies, especially when we aim for like the independents and stuff like that, movies that are not like the blockbusters. We just try to connect with the people who go to the movies. It's what we did over here, and we get up and go to the theater on any day, at any time. And then we're like, there's got to be other people who do this too, who want to talk about this. So that's what we have behind our plan as well. That's it.
I love that.
One of these independent movies, ironically, is Saturday Night. This movie that premiered at festivals, limited release, and then finally gets a nationwide release this past Friday, the 11th. I know that based off what I saw on your Instagram page, you guys had a chance to go see it at TIFF, right?
Yes, yeah. We were invited to the Toronto International Film Festival to go see the premiere of Saturday Night there, and it was just the coolest experience, especially if you're a fan of film.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, to be there. Jason Reitman, the director, he was there. The entire cast of the film, like even people who had like small parts, they were all there, got up on stage, did a Q&A. And at one point, Jason, the director, said to the crowd, said like, how many of you who are here today worked on the film? And I think like 50% of the audience stood up. So we were like, oh wow, this is like really a premiere.
It's very cool. We haven't been anywhere near like that level. We went to a premiere in Montreal where it was a horror movie, and we had that similar type of feeling, but we haven't been like at Fantasia. But
cool.
Going to TIFF, that Saturday night premiere, I remember seeing clips from it, and I'm like, when we talked to Jon about this, I got to talk to him about the premiere, and lo and behold, you posted the premiere, and I'm like, I'm happy he got to go, because if there's any movie I'd ever want anybody to see, it'd be this for you.
Oh, thank you.
Because this is it. This is it. Like to me, it's kind of where I'd like to start. This movie, Saturday Night, for all I know about SNL, to me, this movie felt like it was very good at capturing the magic that SNL is. And I don't mean the chaotic nature of angry writers and Jim Henson. I don't mean it in the chaotic sense. I mean that final 10 minutes of the film's runtime, when the crowd pours in and it's showtime, and I'm sitting there and I have chills on my entire body, even though I knew that this was going to work. It's because you know that SNL is a magical thing, and you're seeing the birth, if you will, although recreated in a biopic sense, of something magical. I want to know, and I know we're starting with the end of the movie, how did you feel in that very moment when you finally see the birth of something that you've studied so many times, and you know how it started, but you get to see it recreated live on screen by actors and by a team,
I thought it was fascinating. I mean, think about it from like a film perspective or a film producing perspective. You have to create a dramatic ending knowing that everyone who's watching the movie will know the ending already. Like the spoilers are out there. Like the show's been around for 50 years. So everybody knows it's going to get on the air. And yet the last 10 minutes of the film are them deciding if they're even going to air episode 1. So we all know what's going to happen, but they still have to make it exciting. And I think they did an amazing job. It really appealed to me as a fan of the show because I know how much of a miracle it is that they get on the sketches that they do every week. Like from a film perspective, the fact that like they can go from just an idea to idea conception to putting it down on paper to reading it to the group to producing it, costuming, sets, all that stuff, going to record and edit it and have it all out within a span of a few days is just amazing that they do that on an every week basis. And then same with live sketches, with camera blockings and all that stuff. I mean, do you know, we're recording this, I'm not sure when this is going to come out, but do you know that this past weekend what happened on the Ariana Grande and Stevie Nicks episode?
Do I know what
like from a production perspective? I don't know if you heard the story. Okay, so let me tell you for the listeners who don't know this. But
wait. Something happened during the musical performance. There was like a 50-second delay. I read about this.
Yeah, so it's totally related to the film, and we'll come back to Saturday Night in a second. But like this goes to show you why SNL is so magical. So basically, during the live show this past weekend, Stevie Nicks, who hadn't been on the show since 1983, everyone's very excited to have her back. She's about to go on stage, sing Edge of 17, a song from the 80s. So you have generations of people from like SNL history that are coming back to watch Stevie Nicks. Everyone's very excited. a bumper goes on screen. If you're watching at home, you're always like really pumped. Okay, this is now the performance. We're about to see, ladies and gentlemen, Stevie Nicks. It stays on screen for like 10 times longer than it should. They go back to commercial. Everyone at home is freaking out. Like, what's going on? Did something happen to Stevie? All of that. And then, but this is a live show, right? They have to like, we're not watching a show that was, recorded.
No, they can't edit. It's like, we got to fix it now. Whatever the problem is, it has to be fixed now.
Right. So it turns out that the audio board in the control room completely malfunctioned, and that they couldn't, in the studio, you could hear the music, but they couldn't get it out to the people at home. So they ended up going to commercial for 5 minutes, got the problem fixed, ended up airing it. And then as a result of that, they went into one more live sketch, but they ran out of time for a planned second live sketch, and ended up airing a sketch that was done in dress rehearsal about an hour and a half earlier.
Wow.
And they aired it as if it was live in order to fit the timing in. Now, back in the 70s, they didn't record dress rehearsal. I mean, eventually they learned like these tricks and things developed over time.
It's actually a bit in the movie, right? Like,
yes.
When Lauren's like, we'll just air dress rehearsal. And then he's confronted with it. He's like, I didn't record dress rehearsal.
Yeah, they actually did. That's an actual true story. They did not record.
Yeah.
They recorded I think the audio of dress rehearsal a few times, but never captured the video, I think, until maybe season 6. So they have these options now, but like the chaos of putting together a live show like this still happens. Like I've physically been backstage at Saturday Night Live over the last few years, and I've got to witness just what is going on before a show, during a show, and after a show. And it is crazy.
Like you use the word chaos, right? But now that they've done it so many times, even if it's chaotic, there's like I said, like that magic touch of them, you're in the middle of a moment. Like every week must feel like that moment. Even if they do it every week, you're doing it all over. Like, you know what I mean? You would know this. Like you said, you're an event MC. No matter how many weddings you do, for us, It's a wedding. But a wedding is still really special. And I work weddings, which is why I could say it. Every wedding is still special, even if it's a wedding. And I feel like SNL enters that same type of realm where it's like, yes, we're doing this every week, but every week it's got to be special. We got to do it right. And it's going to be, something might go wrong, but we'll deal with it. We've learned how to deal with these things, but we got to still, one thing at a time type of thing,
You're so right. I mean, look, I've done weddings where chaos has happened, and then as the MC or the DJ, you just have to figure out what to do to get everything back on track. But at that point, you're typically one, maybe two people who need to get the train back on the track. Yeah. At Saturday Night Live, there's so many different departments that have to be coordinated with that it's just a different beast, I think, to get everything together. So
it's macro level, right?
Right.
It's huge compared to
So it's just like. Yeah. Even when like I said, like when I've been backstage, I was backstage last year for the Rami Youssef episode in season 49, and I had a visitor's pass. I was like hanging out in the dressing rooms and like talking to people and just like networking and all that. And like after the show, like if you have one of those passes, like you could basically just like walk around anywhere. Like there's like there's security, but like they don't know who you are because there's so many people that are there from different areas of life that they don't know if you're like like Drake's best friend or something like that. Like they don't know who you are. Like so you're just like walking around, like looking at the studio, going to see the sets, like all of that stuff. So there's just so much, and I say like chaos, but it's maybe more controlled chaos at this point compared to what it was in 1975. But yes, to answer your question, going back to the end of the film, I think it was really special the way that they did it. My worry going into the movie was that they were going to end the film without showing the first sketch. It's a little different.
That was your core like worry?
Yes, that was actually my core worry. I was really worried because I was worried that like I think that final scene is so important as an SNL fan that they put it in there, which is they showed the Wolverine sketch, which is the first sketch ever that aired on SNL. And they show it, and the movie does end with Chevy saying "Live from New York." Yeah. So you get the start of the first episode basically, and you know how that actually does begin. And I was actually very worried that they weren't going to get there. I think the difference really in my mind is the film goes from being just about the lead up to the show to the fact that the show actually went live and it went well. Like, and that to me was what really worked there.
Yeah. So as somebody who was going in like blind without thinking too far ahead at what the ending would be. I was really, really happy with how they made it to that. It's like that happy ending amidst all the chaos. Even though you know it's coming, the payoff feels so sweet when it finally happens. And like you said, you as an SNL, I'm going to call you an SNL expert. I don't know if that's how you would refer,
Sure, I'll take it.
I'm going to call you an SNL expert. You're hoping that they fit in that first sketch, and I'm just hoping to get a good ending. And what I'm happy with out of this conversation is that as an SNL diehard fan and as a diehard film fan, we're both happy with the ending of a movie about something so important in the history of film and television.
Because, yeah, totally. Do you can I ask you, did you feel that after you watched it that you wanted to go watch that first episode?
I got out of the first thing I Googled when I came out of the theater was John Belushi ice skating? Okay. Which I do want to ask you. I want to ask you later on. And I wanted to know that, and then I wanted to know what the first sketch was, and if it was actually that sketch. And from what I could gather, I rewatched it on my phone, and I was like, "This is, I don't know." Like, I'm like, it's iconic to me. I didn't want to watch the first episode, but just that I didn't necessarily feel the urge to rewatch like the entire first season or anything like that. But I wanted to know where some of the stuff that they were working on in the movie appeared. I wanted to know if the hard hat sketch with Dan Aykroyd in short shorts like made it, because how in the movie his character is so.
Do you know the answer to that?
Yes, it did. No, it did.
Yeah, episode 4.
Okay. I thought it was 6. Who's it? Who is it? Lily Tomlin?
I'm pretty sure.
Who's in it?
Oh no. You're right. You are so right. Yeah. See, you're the SNL expert here. No,
I'm not. I'm not. We're not going to go back and forth trying to figure out when stuff aired on SNL. But I remember reading.
No,
Lily
it was
Tomlin.
episode 6. You're so right.
Okay. Good. And I saw like I was just curious as like, did they actually use this or did they write in a sketch for this movie?
There was a lot of stuff like that. Like like I think they showed a shot of Franken and Davis, two of the writers, working on a Julia Child piece that Dan Aykroyd ended up having, but that was like in season 4 of the show. John Belushi as a weatherman on Weekend Update, like him next to Chevy, like that was from season 3, I'm pretty sure. So
those were more like nods than actual like pieces.
Yeah, well, like there's a prop somewhere that says colon blow on it, and that's from season 15, like in the 90s. So it's like they a lot of it was like a love letter to the show, in my opinion, where they took creative liberties to make the show exciting, and also for SNL superfans to feel like, okay, there's a lot of really cool stuff here. I would say that like the spirit of the first night was definitely there. The accuracy of everything is a little bit, adjusted, but we can get into anything you want to get into.
It's so like let's start there. The accuracy. I'm not trying to be inconsiderate to the SNL lore. Does accuracy really matter in this context of film?
No, definitely not.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
I was going to say, I didn't want you to be like, oh, yes, of course it does.
No.
Because I don't feel that way either.
I'm not one of those people. Okay. Yeah, because I think like this isn't a documentary. It's, it's like it's creative, it's fun, and honestly, if it was a documentary, I don't think it would be doing so well. Like like a lot of people care about the show and are interested, especially in this like 50th anniversary season, about learning about the history of the show. Like that is why we are producing these like sort of short things on our YouTube channel, but called like the story of season 1, season 2, whatever. But
they're actually awesome. They're awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I appreciate that. Actually, they're actually called Everything You Need to Know About SNL.
I was gonna say it's everything you need to know about season 1, 2, etc.
Yeah, we end up promoting them as the story. But yes, so like there's definitely like a segment of the population that like wants to know that. But this, to me, I've been describing this. So just completely by coincidence, my other favorite show of all time is a show called 24. I don't know if you've ever watched it. But
they don't feel like they go. But I see where you're headed, but I don't feel like they don't really line up SNL and 24. But
I know, but it was just like that was my show. Like I love that so much. Like I don't know, they got different things out of me, but I love that show as well.
Yeah.
And in a weird way, this movie was a mix between 24 and SNL.
It really is.
It's just a show. It's like it's happening in real time, and you're watching it go. And I don't think that you could accurately show the 90 minutes before the first episode of SNL and tell a coherent story unless you took creative liberties. So I think that is why this movie is being successful, because they ended up making it more inaccurate than what actually happened. But saying all that, like, again, the spirit of what happened is there. So I wouldn't necessarily look at this and be like, oh, none of this was true, you know?
No, I agree. It's that bridge that there's like a meeting point where you have to decide, am I going to stay 100% true to the source material and have like a story that comes off a little bit? Because you don't get a movie like this if you stay 100% true to the source material. Like you said, you got to exercise creative liberty. And that's what this movie does. And I like how you said the 24 thing, because that's something that was like a reoccurring theme in a lot of reviews of the movie. People like the idea of how this thing feels timed and how they keep showing you the clock on screen. And I actually had an experiment at some point during the movie. I looked at my my Apple Watch, and it had the time written, and this is the time on screen. It was like 10:40 something. And I kept my phone down and my watch down, and then when I looked back up, when it popped back up, I think they were like a minute off of what time, like the time difference. They do a really good job at sticking to the pace, and it kind of rides like parallel to SNL in a way, because as SNL is a 90-minute sketch, sketch, I don't want to sketch show trying to fit all of its thing into its 90 minutes. Sometimes they run over time, or they're cut for time, right? This movie feels like it takes that essential and tries to fit it into its runtime, and it doesn't, and it really just squeezes it in there and gets something that's very compact, not exhaustingly dense, but just compact and really fun to watch. Because you see this a lot in film, is a movie will try to cut its runtime, and then you lose the plot, it just feels rushed. And this movie doesn't feel rushed, but it is a rush. It's exhilarating, and like you said, I'm sure that's how being backstage before a show feels like. As somebody who's been there, I'm sure you can attest to that. Like you said earlier, like that chaos, and that's what the vibe the movie gives off, is that chaotic energy, and it makes for such a fun movie. I want to know, how many times have you seen this movie? Have you seen it
so far? Just
once?
I just went to I just went to the one time in Toronto. I am going to see it again once we get a break from an SNL week, but I'm hoping to get to that again soon. My dad really wants to go, so I'm going to go with him.
It's worth watching. I've seen it twice. I've gone 2 times in a very short amount of time, so it's really fresh in my mind. I had a question for you. If you can remember back to that first screening in Toronto, seeing all these actors playing real life actors, and characters that you've studied and seen so many times through various SNL episodes. Do you have an actor who played their actor the best? I don't know if you understand my question.
Yeah, which the one best portrayal?
Yeah, best portrayal. That's the best way to say it, for sure.
No worries. Yeah, I think Corey Michael Smith, who played Chevy, did a really good job with Chevy Chase. Mm-hmm. I was very impressed with that. I felt like that was like really accurate. Like, he played the tone of like the asshole Chevy, who sort of comes in and is pompous. So I thought that was really well done. Dylan O'Brien was excellent at Dan Aykroyd as well. Mm-hmm. Really captured his essence. But to me, like, the star of this movie is Lamorne Morris as Garrett Morris.
Really?
Yeah, he is fantastic as him. And it's so funny because, like, if you go back and you watch those first 5 years of SNL, I love them, Garrett Morris and Lorraine Newman, but they are like very seen as like the B players or the C players compared to some of the other cast members there. So Garrett Morris, who is the only black cast member, there's no black writers, and is sort of like needs to find a way to get his voice on the show. And I felt like they did a great job of incorporating Garrett into the movie, and Lamorne was just a fantastic. So I would shout out those 3 in particular as awesome performances.
That's the second you said Corey Michael Smith, that was mine. That was my pick as well. Because to me, there's no one who stole the show. Every scene he was in, he somehow managed to like completely steal whatever the other actors were doing on screen. He was, like you said, he comes in as like very braggadocious. Granted, they've all seemingly accomplished very little at that point in their career. They're all starting out. Yet he is he's like the cool guy on campus, you know, like or at least he acts that way. He has this really good scene, in my opinion, with J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons playing Mr. Television, and they have this nice exchange, this really good exchange. But I'm really interested in your pick of Morris. I forgot it. Garrett Morris.
Yeah, played by Lamorne Morris.
Yeah, Lamorne Morris, exactly. Garrett Morris, played by Lamorne Morris. They share the same last name. Anyway, that pick is really intriguing to me because of how much screen time Lamorne Morris gets. Now, I will say, not as an actor, but in his performance, he does a really good job at conveying I don't know what I'm doing here, but if I am here, you're going to put me on TV. Like, you know, like that type of, he's got that type of vibe to him where he doesn't really know why he's hired, but he's trying. He's older than everybody else, but he's trying to be on TV. He's trying to make his voice heard on the show, like you said. Take me into Garrett Morris starting out. Like you said, you mentioned that they were like B and C players on the show. Now, if Lamorne Morris steals the show to you in this movie, does Garrett Morris steal the show when he appears on SNL in those early years as well?
Not really. I mean, he has his moments, I'd say, but it's really tough sledding for Garrett. Like Garrett, as you said, is the oldest one of the cast members that stayed on. There was actually secret or Easter egg here just from listening to this podcast. There was an additional cast member named George Coe, who was only a cast member for the first episode that was not mentioned or seen in this film at all. But that was just like
cut him out.
Yeah, he was like actually the old guy that was there because he was 46. But Garrett was 38. And for the most part, everybody else was either in their like mid to late 20s. So he was older than them, came from New Orleans, was like a great playwright and singer. And again, being the only black cast member and there not being other black people really working on the show, like the stories have been told over the years about how like there wasn't a natural fit for him to be able to like write material and get himself in sketches. And it isn't really until episode 7 of that first season, the Richard Pryor episode, which is a very famous episode of SNL, seen as like one of the greatest episodes ever, where Pryor comes in and like everyone's just in awe of him. And he basically, Richard Pryor said to Lorne and to everybody, said, I want Garrett to say "Live from New York" tonight. Prior to that, it had only been Chevy who had done it for those like first 6 episodes, and Chevy Chase was basically seen as like the original. He's doing the update, he's doing Live from New York, he ends up playing President Ford in the 4th episode. So it's really sort of like Chevy's becoming the star of the show, and Garrett isn't really all over the show in those early episodes. So he has like a pretty fun night with Pryor, and then there aren't that many black hosts that come in throughout those first few years. It takes a while to like get himself going. Even after Chevy leaves, like Bill Murray comes in and becomes a cast member, and still like Garrett's sort of in the shadows. In season 5, I think after John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd leave, like Garrett sort of has like a little bit more room to do stuff. But between all of that and there sort of being like drugs behind the scenes and like things, the 70s of SNL is
the 70s, like, exactly.
Yeah, it was the 70s. So overall, like Garrett's story on SNL, like he's like a pioneer, like again the first black cast member, or somebody who like and if he was to appear, he's still around. If he was to appear on SNL at some point this season, like everybody would go absolutely nuts. But at the time, I think it was more of a challenge for him to find his place on the show. And I feel that watching the movie, seeing Lamorne Morris playing Garrett, it reminded me about like how talented of a person Garrett is and how misused he was. Like the show would have been so much better had they used Garrett more. And just to see Lamorne like singing and standing around there and being this star but not being used, like I felt like he really captured something there.
It feels like it's not like a jab, but it's showing you like, what if you would have used this guy more? Like what if, because Lamorne Morris in this movie, he does play that I don't want to say desperate, but like you said, you said tough sledding for Garrett. Well, Lamorne is able to transmit that to the audience. Even though it's 90 minutes, Lamorne is like hands over his head, like, I don't know really what's going to happen here. And then they count on him for like one thing, or he steals the moment in one thing, especially towards the end. He sings and he breaks out in song, and he's able to convince everybody to get on board, and everything is good. And that's definitely a moment, now that you just kind of shared that with me, that little anecdote about Gary Morris, that you feel like for the amount of talent this guy had, perhaps his utilization of the show could have been better. How many seasons did Garrett do on SNL?
Gary did 5 seasons. He was there for the original 5.
Okay, he left after 5. Okay. He left after 5.
Yeah. All right. Well, but I would say, my feelings about those portrayals, sort of in contrast to some of the other ones of the original cast members, which is, look, I think everybody did a good job, but I think it was Matt Wood played John Belushi.
I wanted to get on to the topic of John Belushi, especially the way he's portrayed in this movie. I wanted to ask you about him, but go ahead.
So I was gonna say, do you want to ask me something about it before I get into
it? No. I want to let you finish whichever thought you were getting. Matt Wood played John Belushi.
He played John Belushi, and I think that this was my biggest problem with the movie, if I'm being honest with you, which was I think he looked like him, and I get what he was going for, but if you go back and you watch, early John Belushi on Saturday Night Live, I don't think that Matt Wood was playing John Belushi when he first started on the show. I think he was playing him as a little bit more like disheveled later on. And like, this is coming from somebody who I've interviewed, John Belushi's widow, Judy Belushi, before, and have spoken to many people who've known John Belushi, and obviously watched like all of the material that I've seen of him. But like, when John first got the show, it was Chevy who encouraged him to come on. So like, them fighting in the dressing room, sort of like it's okay. It's one thing to take creative liberties, but it's another to like really mess up the timeline so that the perception of that relationship was different. Because yes, John and Chevy, there was tension and they started to not get along, and I believe that there was some sort of fight that occurred, but this is like later in season 1. We're talking about like almost a year later. At the beginning, John Belushi was like, as far as I understand, very excited to do Saturday Night Live. He saw this as like his next big opportunity to be a star of the show, and this whole thing about like him not signing his contract and lying on the ice skating rink, like I think that was like mostly fabricated.
So I want to offer a little bit of context, because I hear what you're saying. But John Belushi was such an interesting character in this movie. Now, it's kind of, honestly, it's heartbreaking to hear the way that you're saying how it might not be that way, because in this movie, he's such a, he's pivotal to the story. Lorne, based off what you understand watching this movie, Lorne feels like this can't happen without John. He needs John, or he desperately wants John. And they have John fights with Chevy Chase over a comment he makes about shaving. Anyway, they throw an ashtray at each other. They get into this big fight backstage, and John ends up skating in a Rockefeller Center on the ice rink. And Lorne, towards the end of the movie, finds him on the ice. And I'm saying these names like real life people, but I'm talking about the characters in the movie. When Lorne walks out to the ice rink and he sees John dressed up in his bee costume, and he's skating around, and there's this touching moment for both characters in the movie where you feel like he's got to get John on board, because it'll really help Lorne's, first of all, Lorne's mental state, and Lorne's belief that he has in himself and in the show. It's like a 2-part question. The first one's a little goofy. Why is John in a bee costume on the ice rink? And I know you know the answer to this. When you Google John Belushi skating, you see a picture of him in his bee costume on the ice rink. But was that actually happening 15 minutes before showtime of night 1? Or is that not accurate?
Well, no, not exactly. I mean, so I'll try and try and give you as much context as possible.
Yeah.
Which is that in the first episode, and really the first like 3 episodes of the show, the SNL was more of a variety show than a sketch comedy show. There was musical acts there. You saw like Billy Crystal there to do some stand-up, like all of that type of stuff was happening. There was the news, like there were so many things that made SNL that nobody really knew what the show was, and that was accurate. So as a result, these cast members sort of didn't know exactly what they would be doing on the show, like what was really their roles in place. And in the first episode of the show, there is a sketch where they are playing bees. And it's very well known as being like the first recurring characters in the history of Saturday Night Live. And what defined the original days of SNL is it was known as countercultural. So they felt like they were the first people who grew up. I think they mentioned this in the show, but they were in the movie, but they were the first generation to grow up having watched television. And as a result, they were willing to make fun of politicians, go against the grain. And like nothing was off the table, basically. So after the first episode, when they got the notes from the executives at NBC about the show, they were told to cut the bees. They said, we don't want any more bee sketches. And the cast basically revolted against it.
Yeah.
And they said, well, fuck that. We're going to play the bees in every show. So we got the bees for like a bunch of episodes. And Belushi was like a big part of that. Belushi was sort of seen as like the king bee, which he ends up like doing a performance as King Bee, doing a Joe Cocker impression. And he's a big part of that. So for me, like the whole idea that Belushi didn't want to do, like maybe he didn't want to wear the stupid bee costume at one point. Like maybe these are all like little anecdotes that people told. But I just think like there are going to be millions of people that are going to walk away from this film thinking that John Belushi was like extremely difficult to work with from the beginning of his time at the show. And I really don't think that was the case. Like I think that was something that developed over time. So when we're talking about creative liberties, I think there's a difference between saying like taking something that happened in 1978 like a sketch and putting it in 1975, but when you're talking about how a person develops or how a person was seen, especially somebody who hasn't been around for 40 years, I think it's like a little tough.
Yeah, and I was gonna say that, especially when you get somebody, you're perhaps the right way to say this is you're poorly portraying someone who can't defend themselves in a way. Not that they're egregiously disrespecting John Belushi in this movie, but I do agree with you. They do make him look like, for lack of a better term, they make him look like an asshole. He's willing to, fight anybody at any time. And the only person, and I was watching this and I felt like the only other time I've seen this type of relationship is like in the Avengers movies where Hulk gets calmed down by Scarlet Witch, but when they send Rachel Sennett's Rosie
Schuster.
Yeah, Rosie Schuster over to calm him down. And he's laying down and she's like, calm down, big guy, and she gives him his little cigarette and then he calms down. And I'm like, I feel like for night one, John is coming in like way too aggressive for this. So I had to ask you about John. Like his entire portrayal is interesting. His entire life is interesting. But in the movie, I feel like for such an iconic person, especially in the world of SNL, I feel like, I'm going to call it like it is, I feel like it was a little disrespectful in a way to kind of chalk him up to, he's an angry guy, And although
I don't think I wouldn't call it disrespectful only just because I don't think that was the intention. Like I said, I still think this was a love letter, and I think that they tried. Like I don't blame Matt Wood or Jason Reitman or Gil Keenan, like any of the people who produced this. I don't think that they were trying to do this with John. I just think they were trying to.
Sorry, I want to clear it up. I don't mean intentional disrespect. I don't mean they wrote it down to be like, but it comes off in a way where you're like, but can't give him a break, like he's not, it comes off in a way where I'm like, they could have probably controlled it in a way for it to come out better than it did. That's how I feel.
I agree. Yeah, no, then that's a great way to put it. I think that I don't know. See, it's interesting here because there's like a couple things that are going on that make the movie so compelling. One is the idea of like, are they going to be able to get the show off the ground, and can they do that if a cast member isn't around? So yes, like I get what they were going for. And the other is like, is Lorne Michaels going to just lose his mind? And just like him, who is supposed to be like composed, and is he gonna just break at a certain point? And I think from a outsider's perspective, it makes total sense that Lorne Michaels would be that way, where it's the point where he's just like keeping it together in the hopes that everything comes together. But my understanding of Lorne, who is somebody who I can't really say that I've spoken to, and I hope to get that opportunity down the road, but just a lot of people who I've interviewed, Neil Levy, the guy in the film who was his cousin, who was sort of his assistant at the time and became a writer and a producer later on. I've spoken with family members of Lorne. My understanding of Lorne Michaels is that he is like as stoic and composed as ever, and like super carefree, and that I think Gabriel LaBelle did an amazing job for a film portrayal of Lorne Michaels, but I think in reality on that first night where there was so much chaos, I think Lorne was unflappable. He wouldn't have broken. He was completely going to keep it together no matter what happened, and he's just like as cool as can be, and that's how he's been for his entire life. So I do think like those two portrayals, the Lorne Michaels one and the John Belushi one, really added to the story of the film. But from an accuracy perspective, I think we're not legitimate.
As an outsider, I'm going to call myself an outsider. I didn't feel like Lorne Michaels' character completely loses it in this, the way that you kind of just described. Like when you said that he's able to stay composed. To me, there's no bigger testament to being composed than he's talking to John Belushi on the ice rink. And I'm talking about this is purely in the movie. And John's like, and he's like, okay, buddy, come on, let's go. And John's like, no, I'm going to lay here. And he's like, all we have is time. So he just lays beside him. I feel like a leader who feels compromised, who feels like they're losing it, there'd be more yelling, more like, even he has a scene with Cooper Hoffman, Gabriel LaBelle and Cooper Hoffman. I have the cast list here because I can't remember.
Dick Ebersol, I think he's playing. Yeah.
That's right. Dick Ebersol. Exactly. In the hallway, in the staircase, which is a great scene, like great acted, well shot. Everything about that scene is magnificent. But anyway, as soon as he walks out from the staircase, he gets shot with they spray him with the blood paint thing. And he's just looking at them like, great job, guys. Like, he whereas you see a lot of characters, a lot of people probably in this cast, especially the way that they portray John Belushi, would have lost their mind, would have been yelling and screaming and slamming everything. There's only one scene where Lorne loses his cool, in my opinion, and that's when he rips down the papers. He just completely rips all the papers off the wall, and he's like, oh, fine, we're good now. Like, we're good. And he does storm out. He does a thing. But as the way that you described him, where you're like, he wouldn't lose his, I don't feel like he did as an outsider. I'm like, he's doing a really good job. This is Lorne Mike. Like, there's a lot of pressure on him. I don't know. I didn't feel like they necessarily made him look not stoic or not composed.
Well, I think you're right, except that the whole film is told from the POV of Lorne. So you are basically watching the show as if or watching the film as if you're like in his brain and
over his shoulder.
Eyes, over the shoulder of him.
Yeah.
And I feel like he's sort of the way that the camera work, the way that they're editing, the way that they're showing his face is almost like on the outside to everyone else, he's not losing his mind. But you see on the inside, it looks like he's about to crack, I think. And
fair enough. That's fair.
That's where I see it. And I just don't know if that's true. Now, on the list of things that I had a problem with about this film, that's not very high. But I'm just saying, if we're just talking about how like accurate certain things were, I just wonder if that was really the case, if they were trying to build some sort of insecurity in Lorne that wasn't actually there. But overall, I think that, again, there was a lot of really good portrayals. Gabriel LaBelle was fantastic. Like, I could see him winning a lot of awards for this film.
I was about to say that, where I feel like his facial expressions, his mannerisms, his that feeling like he's about to crack, a lot of that has to come from the actor in the moment, where what type of facial expression are you giving off? What type of reaction are you going to give trying to portray this character? And so I don't think Lorne is written to be looking like he's going to crack. I think that's just Gabriel LaBelle's face in a way. Like, I feel like the one true moment of nervousness, the closest I feel like he is to cracking, is when he comes out of the control room. He has his hand on the arm, and the light beams coming across his face, and he just has this look on his face. He's mean mugging the whole thing. He's waiting for John Belushi to come down the stairs of the first sketch. And he's like, did John come back, type of thing. And that is the moment in the movie where, and this kind of ties back to what we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, the ending of the movie, where you're like, this is it. This is that moment. And that's the only moment where I felt like shit. And I knew the ending. You know the ending. But the expression on Gabriel Lavelle's face as Lorne, you're like, oh, this is the moment where Lorne is actually worried about John not coming out. This is the moment where he's like, if John doesn't walk out, we can't fix it anymore. They will cut to the Johnny Carson. Like, you know, like we can't.
But I see in real life, they wouldn't have done that. Like in real life, if Belushi's not there, they're cutting to a different sketch that doesn't have Belushi in it, or they're starting with George Carlin or something like that.
So that menace, that menacing threat of NBC cutting to Johnny Carson is not accurate.
I don't think so. The only part that is, and that's actually, by the way, the number one question that I got with people asking me after this film was SNL about to turn to a rerun of Carson, and I don't think that is true. Mm-hmm. However, there is something that is very accurate that a lot of people don't realize is true, which is, that scene where Lorne has a phone call with Johnny Carson and he's sort of like, good luck, like, don't break a leg. But,
he's just being a really big asshole to him on the phone, essentially.
That was true.
So Johnny Carson does call in to threaten.
I don't know
him,
when that happens, but it does happen at some point, because that's my understanding, is that again, this show was conceived originally to replace reruns of Carson on Saturday nights. Yeah, Johnny was like, let's give it a shot, but didn't expect that SNL was going to end up being a thing.
No,
and
I
don't think he was happy
fail.
about it.
Yeah.
Like, especially, by the way, because Chevy ends up becoming a really big star on SNL in he's basically the star of season 1.
Yeah.
And the talk around, Hollywood is Chevy Chase going to be the next Johnny Carson? And I think that really bothered Johnny.
Well, I can only imagine, right? No one wants to be replaced. And then you get a megastar who feels threatened.
Yeah. Can I just jump in with one more thing? I just want to make sure that I don't, before we move on to anything else, I just want to make sure that I say something about Gilda, Jane, and Lorraine, who we didn't just get to talk about on the show here at all. But I just want to say, first of all of those women are absolutely fantastic. Like, you go back and watch those original SNL days, like, all brought amazing stuff to the show. Jane ends up being an incredible Weekend Update anchor down the road. Gilda Radner is obviously like an absolute legend.
Yes.
I think we saw a little bit more of Ella Hunt as Gilda, but as far as the portrayals of Jane and Lorraine were concerned, like, we barely saw them in the show, in the movie. And though it was like a little bit more difficult for the women of SNL to sort of figure out their place at the show to start, I do think that the movie could have given them more. Like, I think if you are a woman, or even a man, if you're anybody, you're going to watch a show and you love these like original women that were on SNL, like, I don't think you're walking away extremely satisfied by getting to see like great stuff from Gilda, great stuff from Jane or Lorraine. And that was like a little bit my disappointment, because when they show John Belushi as like a weatherman on Weekend Update, like, that could have been Gilda Radner as like one of her famous early characters on Update, like Emily Latella, and I think that would have given a lot to the audience.
That's something that it's actually nice that you mentioned that, because sitting here trying to talk about the movie, just talking about the film. If we want to talk about SNL, we could talk about Gilda Radner, like you said. We could talk about the women of SNL forever. But in this movie, you're right. They don't get as much love, as much screen time, as much significance. Really, it's the cast members that matter, that get the most in this movie are Chevy, Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, and Garrett Morris. Garrett Morris, who ironically get the less screen time than all of those people during the real life SNL. He gets some during the this film. It really wraps around those four, because the movie really feels like it's more about Lorne in a way. And it's actually, I just want to touch back onto the thing that you said earlier. You were talking about the Johnny Carson phone call to Lorne in the office. In the film, they present that during a time where Dick Ebersol is walking around with a Polaroid, trying to get them to promote Polaroid during the show. And they try to promote it to John Belushi, who throws it over the set, like violently just throws it and storms off. I want to know, is there actually a push to try to get these actors to promote this camera in the first season or at any time?
Yeah, in the first season, yes, it happens. I think later on. One I can remember is Candice Bergen's second time hosting. She hosts episode 4, and then she hosts the Christmas episode in episode 8. And I think in that Christmas episode, they do a whole segment on showing off the Polaroid camera. And it's not, there was no like writing for it. It sort of like was comedic in that they like joked around with it, but it was an actual ad that aired like during the show.
Okay.
So this was a very legitimate thing that happened.
Yeah, I just because that scene, it kind of takes away from that phone call if you like, because you're focused on Lauren's expression, who's like, don't give the camera to Jon, please don't give and he gives the camera and just throws it at the wall. The movie is designed to be hilarious and entertaining, especially to outsiders. That's why I keep picking your mind about things that you would know as an SNL, like I said, SNL expert, you know. But Jon, I don't want to take all of your time. I want to ask you one final big question. I want to know your opinion about something. And this is about how you feel in the SNL sphere, okay? There's this really nice scene, and I keep saying nice scene because they're heartwarming to me, where Lauren is standing with Willem Dafoe's character, and I'm trying to find his name, David Tebbutt, who is a big NBC figure, and he's standing there and he keeps asking him, what is Saturday Night? Like, what is this? What is it? What is it? And Gabriel was like, he comes up with this thing and he says, it's a reflection of our city. When somebody comes into New York, I want SNL to feel, I say SNL, it grew to be SNL. I want Saturday Night to feel like that. I want everything that they see on television to feel like what New York is. And they mention it a lot in the movie. They're like, it's a reflection of America, a reflection of New York, a reflection of America, a reflection of New York. And they actually then, he's like, show me then. So then they bring him through Weekend Update. They put him through a bunch of skits. Garrett Morris has this singing performance. They do something really cool, like in that little minute. But I want to know, as Lauren stands there saying SNL is a reflection of New York, what does SNL mean to you, Jon?
So it is interesting because I think the original intention of the show was for SNL to be a reflection of New York, but I sort of think that SNL became a reflection of pop culture through every season it's been on. Like, you can go back to 1975 and watch it to 2025 and feel that you understand what the most popular songs were at the time, the most popular movies are being made fun of. You watch Weekend Update, you hear the jokes. What was happening in politics. You know, we enter 1975 like post Watergate and Nixon being removed from office, and you know, Ford and all of that stuff, and you like learn about American politics in a way that you know that makes it fun. Like, imagine like every one of you who's ever been in a history class and you're sitting there like bored, like listening to your teacher like tell you about some like war that happened, but you actually could be watching episodes of Saturday Night Live from back in the day and then learning about history and what was, you know, people will remember and talk about being popular from the time. And I think it's like a reflection of culture, truly. And so yeah,
it's even bigger than whatever they had envisioned it, which is normal. It's grown that far, but it's, and to you personally, SNL, what is that like as an individual? I know that it's not your everything, but what does it mean to you, Jon?
Yeah, I mean, I'll partially credit Rich Tackenberg, who's one of our great analysts on the Saturday Night Network, who often says that like SNL is, when it's at its best, is like a party that we're all invited to. And I think like a lot of people grow up wanting to make something of themselves in the world, like be notable for being a great actor or singer, or, you know, accomplishing something, maybe being a great doctor, lawyer, accountant, like whatever you want to be, but you want to like feel like your life was of value in some way, that you're going to be remembered. And I think like that is the obsession with celebrity culture in a little bit, was like all of these people who like made it that are going to be idolized in some way. And like, why are they like that? Why are they so talented? Like, what did they do to get to this stardom? And, you know, it's basically like the one time that we actually get to know these stars as people. Yeah. And so it's like a window into like, almost like it's like a psychological thing. Like, it's a window into like, as a society, like how we view celebrity. So for me, like, I always felt like, as somebody who loves pop culture, loves like the celebrity lifestyle and Hollywood and like just like interest the same way that you love film.
Yeah.
Like, for you watch thousands of films and you start to get to know actor tendencies, but it isn't until maybe you watch these people on SNL that you actually get to know these people as people. And like that is really cool for me, and maybe gives an idea of what it means to me to watch the show.
I was just building off of what you're saying. As much as I like film, SNL it's like a one-stop shop for everything. You can get something for anybody watching that. Flip on your TV Saturday night at 11:30, and you are going to see something that you are going to like over the course of 90 minutes. And as somebody who's so deep into film, SNL is, whether I like it or not, a pillar of that, a pillar of film, because of the amount of movie stars that pass through, the amount of people who have worked on it. There's not a single comedy film that you watch nowadays where that person hasn't been through SNL, even now. And more, and those people get, not that SNL is not a massive credit within itself, a massive accomplishment. You see them move on to becoming a movie star, becoming their own headliner in movies. Like, you know what I mean? You see the cast member pass on to something amazing. In more ways than one, SNL feels like I'm trying to find the right word, but it's like going through there is a testament to a great career almost. And it not every time, but I feel that way when I look at movie stars. Some of my favorite actors, they've been through SNL. They've hosted. They've been part of the cast. They've been a musical guest. Even my favorite musicians have been musical guests on SNL. It's you've made it to something, and that's how SNL feels. And being part of a viewership that gets to watch it, an audience that gets to watch it, is awesome for us. It gives us a chance to look into something that feels bigger than us, in my opinion.
I agree.
And I say that as an outsider, not knowing every
I think you nailed
like
it.
that. But yeah. John, a last quick question for you off the top of your head, if you could answer it. An alien comes down from space and wants to know about SNL, and you got to give them a season, or even more precisely, if you can, an episode. I know you've seen them all. Which one would you tell them to watch?
Ooh, okay. I think, my favorite episode of all time is Peyton Manning and Carrie Underwood from season 32. It's a really fun episode front to back, and I think it's like a fun way. You get an athlete that's hosting, so you never know what to expect there, but it's really, really strong, that episode. So that's always been like one of my favorite ones. Some of the best, like there's a few best seasons ever. I like season 34. A lot of people like season 14. Season 3 is probably the best of the original cast. So I'm giving you a lot of answers right now, but it sounds like
a good place to start. Like it sounds.
It does.
Like a good
Yeah.
place to
Like,
start.
that's the problem, right? With Saturday Night Live is like, it's a good problem to have. You have too many great sketches, too many great cast members. So I would, if you're the type of listener who's listening to the show and you've like never watched it, but you're like, okay, I want to get into SNL, like you could for sure go chronologically, and it's a very fulfilling process of seeing the show develop and build upon itself. But you can also cherry pick and choose some of the better seasons and get really enjoyable nights out of watching some great sketches as well. So like, I don't think there's one right answer, and that's the great thing about SNL, is that we can go to the aliens and tell them we have this incredible rich show.
You want to know about know about the world? Take it.
Take it. Yeah, this is how you can learn about you can hear about Chevy Chase and Gerald Ford.
Well, I do plan to watch the Peyton Manning Carrie Underwood episode as soon as possible. That's my next episode that I'm watching. John, I want to say thank you very much for all your time today to talk about this movie. It's a really special movie, and I'm happy to have somebody like you that I know that can come on here and talk about it with all your expertise in the field.
What an honor.
I appreciate it. No, it's the honor's ours. It's awesome to have you.